This is fortunate, for Italians drive as if Hannibal were after them in a Duesenberg, and on crowded roads would soon kill each other off. The people of the European countries I have been in all drive wildly, but whereas the speed of the French grows out of a vivid impatience, and that of the English out of a studied recklessness, the fury of the Italians seems to be born of an angry hysteria. Descending from a vehicle, an Italian sheds his frenzy like a cloak, puts on a thin but comfortable apathy, and stands about in the street. The men of Italian towns and villages do not seem to do anything except stand in the street. Many of them stand quite still, others move around slightly. It is possible to drive through towns in Normandy and Brittany without seeing anybody, but the streets of Italian towns are almost impassable because of the men standing in them. In Grosseto one evening I decided to stand around with the men of the town to see if I could find out what there is in it. I moved around with those who were moving around, and then stood for a while with those who were just standing. It seemed very dull, but perhaps I didn't keep at it long enough. This singular Italian habit is not a strange phenomenon of the present political regimentation, for it originated more than 2,000 years ago. I quote from Theodor Mommsen's History of Rome. The habit of lounging was visibly on the increase. Cato the Elder proposed to have the marketplace paved with pointed stones in order to put a stop to the habit of idling. The Romans laughed at the jest and went on to enjoy the pleasure of loitering and gazing around them. After more than 20 centuries, the Italians still love to loiter and gaze around them. I feel the same way about it that Cato did. Cato the Elder is my favorite character in Italian history, and I am glad that we have come to him so soon. He was fond of a little incantation which he believed would ward off sprains, and he repeated it over and over whenever he felt a sprain coming on. Mommsen gives the formula for this potent in a footnote to his history, and I am pleased to pass it on to you. Whenever then you feel in danger of twisting a wrist or pulling a tendon, you just keep saying, "Hauat, hauat, hauat, ista pista sista damia boda nostra." This is much simpler than another ancient Roman formula for the prevention of gout, which I feel sure old Cato would never have had the patience to go through with. In practicing this gout formula, says Mommsen, you had to think of some other person while fasting, and then repeat the incantation 27 times, touching the earth each time and spitting. Cato, I like to believe, would have regarded that one as a lot of newfangled tomfoolery, as idle as standing in the street. Cato regarded a great many things as tomfoolery, among them priests and women. His inquiry as to how a priest could meet another priest without laughing is still famous, and has been attributed to everybody from Roger Bacon to H.L. Mencken. He declared that all women are plaguy and proud, and that if a man were quit of them, he would lead a less godless life. He considered it a lot of damned nonsense and a major mistake on the part of the gods that women were so constituted as to play a necessary part in the perpetuation of the race, gave them notions, made them think they were somebody. He wrote thousands of words denouncing women, practically all of them sound, but he had, unfortunately, no more effect on changing the morals of his day than D.H. Lawrence had on changing the morals of his. Indeed, Cato lived to see women emancipated to a position of troublesome independence. They possessed property. They raised their voices in the home. A few of them poisoned their husbands. Statues were erected to some of them here and there in Italy. Things reached, in short, that pretty pass where they have ever since remained. Cato's own family life was conducted with disciplined authority, but in spite of everything, with no little tenderness. None of the women of his household ever pushed him completely out of the supervision of any part of its activities. No child of his could be bathed and swaddled unless he was present or had given notice to the effect that he wouldn't be present. I have no doubt the old general could have changed an infant as well as anybody. I am sure he regarded women's pretensions to peculiar and mystic abilities in this connection as a lot of hokery-pokery. The line in all his writings which endears him to me most is that in which he set down with stern dignity the fact that none of his daughters ever caught him manifesting demonstrative affection toward his wife, except once during a thunderstorm when she was frightened. The old gentleman liked his food and his wine, and in his book on husbandry gives the recipe for his own pick-me-up for hangovers. He was wise enough to know that no chant is going to do you any good the morning after a bout with the wine cups. Howat is just so much Boda Nostra at a time like that, and he was probably the first to find it out. The fact that he believed up to the day of his death that you could ward off sprains by making a noise like an owl simply proves how human he was. I am convinced that if Cato were alive, he would improve the system of transporting a motor car by water from Naples to Genoa as it exists under the dread air of the Caesars. Nobody in Naples will tell you to begin with where the ship is. You have to hunt for it. This is to develop your sense of initiative and ingenuity. People who are told where ships are get soft. When you find the ship, they don't want to let you on. A man discovers that you have no Italian visa. You explain that an American doesn't have to have an Italian visa. He points out that nevertheless you haven't got one. When you are finally allowed on board, you are put in the wrong stateroom, and are advised of this after you have unpacked your bags and lain down. This is to teach you to be ready for anything at any time. The purser then appears and takes your automobile papers away from you, with an explanation similar to the undecipherable primitive Iapygian inscriptions that were found on the Calabrian Peninsula. The last that you saw of the automobile itself, it was drifting despondently out to sea on a large raft. If this does not teach you to have faith in the mysterious workings of a system you do not understand, nothing ever will. In Genoa in the morning, you wait for 2 hours for your car to be put on the dock, although it was the only one on the ship. All the gasoline has been taken out of it, and none is put back in. The purser has disappeared from your life forever with your papers. You find yourself in the midst of several hundred men standing or moving slowly around. It now becomes necessary to take all your bags and your tennis rackets out of the car and carry them into the customs house. You explain that your bags have already passed the customs at Ventimiglia, and that you haven't been out of Italy since. The customs man gives the old sprain incantation and sticks a tiny stamp on each bag. A soldier in a gray cloak makes 2 small pencil marks on each stamp. After you have found your papers and got some benzina, it would take hours to tell how this is done, you pile all the bags in the car and drive 90 feet to a man who looks like the man who put the stamps on. He is not, however. He is the man who takes the stamps off. You haul all the bags out of the car, and he removes the stamps one at a time. You pile the bags back in again, and you are ready to go. Thus has the genius of Mussolini instilled energy and efficiency into maritime transportation facilities. Mussolini, since we have arrived at him, has muscled into all the guidebooks in Rome, even those purporting to be devoted to the life and achievement of Appius Claudius and Augustus Caesar. Over the shoulder of every great consul and emperor, every painter and sculptor, peers the busy head of Benito the Magnificent, stealing the light of ancient glories. Let us begin, says one of the guidebooks, from the capital, the center and heart of the town's life, the majesty of which Michelangelo has expressed in terms of architecture, and which, from the genius and love of Mussolini, has received a new and still more solemn dignity. Whereupon the guide to Rome's treasures and antiquities degenerates into a preface to Mussolini. At the end of every guidebook in English, one expects to see the famous lines of Browning, slightly changed by official order. Open my heart, and you will see graven inside of it, Il Duce. The great man has, of course, gone too far with his face. His elated subjects are incapable of snickering, but men cannot continue forever to cheer the utterly commonplace. The striking of a clock in a town of clocks, the falling of rain in a rainy land, a glowering familiar face on every wall and hoarding. In a movie theater in Rome, during a newsreel, the belligerent figure of the helmeted dux, striding across the screen, ripe for applause, was received in complete silence. There was, to be sure, no disapproval in the silence, no hint of strain about it. It was simply devoid of any quality at all, like the eyes of a man looking out a train window. It may be because of the psychological necessity to laugh at some face or other that the heads of Laurel and Hardy are to be seen everywhere in Italy, running Il Duce a fairly close second. You find them on signboards, in movie lobbies, on the walls of buildings, as decorations on fancy stationery, in the form of figurines, ashtrays, toys, and portafortunas. It is, of course, too much to hope that the Italianos detect in Signor Hardy a certain resemblance to the leader. The Saturday Evening Post, to go on to something more interesting, costs 50 cents, 10 lira in Italy, and photoplay 75 cents. I have actually seen Americans carrying copies of them about, too. This is no doubt why the vendors of tortoiseshell and camellias in the streets of Naples invariably approach an American with the chant, "You millionaire, I broke! You millionaire, I broke!" It just happens, I told one of them, that I saved less than $400,000 out of the Wall Street crash. He still insisted I was a millionaire. Nobody believes or pays much attention to anything an American or Englishman says in Italy. They are held in a kind of negligent contempt as the last millionaire representatives of a decadent and outmoded form of government, destined to end up as a footnote to the history books of the totalitarian future. English and American books, newspapers, and magazines attacking fascism you can buy anywhere. The issue of Time, carrying a colored reproduction of Peter Bloom's painting, which presents the head of Mussolini as a jack-in-the-box, was on sale at every kiosk in Rome for a week. "Ickes attacks fascism," shouted the front page of the Paris Herald Tribune from a rack in front of a store in the Piazza di Spagna. If it's writ in English, it's writ in water, appears to be the official government attitude, if it has any attitude, toward the printed chatterings of the dying democracies. On the bulletin board in the first-class lounge of the ship from Naples to Genoa appeared 3 separate copies of the day's wireless news in English. I took one of them as a souvenir. The leading story, under a Washington dateline, began, I quote exactly, as follows. "In long-awaited address to Congress, Roosevelt plunged straight into international situation," states Daily Telegraph correspondent, and speech which broadcasted throughout world declared that dictatorships jeopardized civilization and world peace only safe in democracy's hands. A summary of the whole speech followed. I asked a steward who spoke English what he thought about it. He just laughed. So did I, perhaps a bit hollowly. The sharpest impression that I brought out of Italy was a vivid mental image of the late Colonel Johnstone of the 5th New York Cavalry, of all people. A certain tableau in which the colonel became involved some 75 years ago was brought to my attention, amazingly enough, in the lounge of the Grand Hotel in Sorrento, and for a time erased from my memory the fond picture of Cato the Elder embracing his wife during a thunderstorm. In this hotel lounge there was a bookcase holding perhaps the strangest assortment of English books to be found on the continent. Among them Harold McGrath's Man on the Box, Lily Wesselhoft's, I think it was Wesselhoft's, Flipwing the Spy, the New York Stock Exchange Investment Guide for 1912, and 7 or 8 enormous volumes containing the official reports of officers of the Federal Army and of the Army of the Confederate States of America on the various battles and campaigns of the War of the Rebellion. I took the volume entitled Chancellorsville to read after dinner one night. It contains, in addition to the complete records of that great battle, sundry accounts of less important engagements during the spring of 1863. Every now and then the exploits of Captain, later Major John S. Mosby, the celebrated rebel guerrilla leader, pop up. One report of his activities is set down by a Northern lieutenant I must give in full, for it bodies forth, in a brief and vivid frame of words, the deathless vignette of Colonel Johnstone of the 5th New York Cavalry that so deeply affected me. Fairfax Courthouse, Virginia, March 9th, 1863, 3:30 a.m. General Commanding. Captain Mosby, with his command, entered this town this morning at 2 a.m. They captured my patrols, horses, etc. They took Brigadier General Stoughton and horses, and all his men detached from his brigade. They took every horse they could find, public and private, and the commanding officer of the post, Colonel Johnstone of the 5th New York Cavalry, made his escape from them in a nude state by accident. They searched for me in every direction, but being on the Vienna Road, visiting outposts, I made my escape. L. O'Connor, Lieutenant Provost Marshal. My recollection of what the soldiers of the Duce look like has been somewhat obscured by this clear-cut picture of the confused hell that broke loose in Fairfax Courthouse on the morning of March 9, 1863. The 8 million heirs of Caesar's 10th Legion, who, with the armies of the Führer and the Mikado, may someday unite against communism, democracy, and the other powers of darkness in order to bring light and peace to an undisciplined world, may be something to worry about. If so, you will have to worry about them. Italy and her boasts and threats have begun to fade from my mind. I keep thinking of Colonel Johnstone of the 5th New York Cavalry. I can't help wondering whatever became of him. There's no place like home. Idling through a London bookstore in the summer of 1937, I came upon a little book called Collins' Pocket Interpreters, France, written especially to instruct the English how to speak French in the train, the hotel, the quandary, the dilemma, etc. It is, of course, equally useful, I might also say equally depressing, to Americans. I have come across a number of these helps for travelers, but none that has the heavy impact, the dark cumulative power of Collins's. A writer in a London magazine mentions a phrase book got out in the era of Imperial Russia which contained this one magnificent line, "Oh dear, our postilion has been struck by lightning." But that fantastic piece of disaster, while charming and provocative, though I dare say quite rare even in the days of the Tsars, is to Mr. Collins' modern workaday disasters as Fragonard is to George Bellows, or Sarah Orne Jewett to William Faulkner. Let us turn the pages of this appalling little volume. Each page has a list of English expressions, one under the other, which gives them the form of verse. The French translations are run alongside. Thus, on the first page, under the port of arrival, we begin, quietly enough, with "Porter, here is my baggage." "Porteur, voici mes bagages." From then on, disaster follows fast and follows faster, until in the end, as you shall see, all hell breaks loose. The volume contains 3 times as many expressions to use when one is in trouble as when everything is going all right. This, my own experience has shown, is about the right ratio, but God spare me from some of the difficulties for which the traveler is prepared in Mr. Collins' melancholy narrative poem. I'm going to leave out the French translations because, for one thing, people who get involved in the messes and tangles we are coming to invariably forget their French and scream in English anyway. Furthermore, the French would interrupt the fine, free flow of the English and spoil what amounts to a dramatic tragedy of an overwhelming and original kind. The phrases, as I have said, run one under the other, but herein I shall have to run them one after the other. You can copy them down the other way if you want to. Trouble really starts in the canto called "In the Customs Shed." Here we have, "I cannot open my case. I have lost my keys. Help me to close this case. I did not know that I had to pay. I don't want to pay so much. I cannot find my porter. Have you seen Porter 153? That last query is a little masterstroke of writing, I think, for in those few words we have a graphic picture of a tourist lost in a jumble of thousands of bags and scores of customs men, looking frantically for one of at least 153 porters. We feel that the tourist will not find Porter 153, and the note of frustration has been struck. One tourist, accompanied by his wife, I like to think, finally gets on the train for Paris, having lost his keys and not having found his porter, and it comes time presently to go to the dining car, although he probably has no appetite, for the customs men, of course, have had to break open that one suitcase. Now I think it is the wife who begins to crumble. "Someone has taken my seat. Excuse me, sir, that seat is mine. I cannot find my ticket. I have left my ticket in the compartment. I will go and look for it. I have left my gloves, my purse, in the dining car." Here the note of frenzied disintegration, so familiar to all travelers abroad, is sounded. Next comes the sleeper, which begins ominously with "What is the matter?" and ends with "May I open the window? Can you open this window, please?" We realize, of course, that nobody is going to be able to open the window and that the tourist and his wife will suffocate. In this condition, they arrive in Paris, and the scene there on the crowded station platform is done with superb economy of line. I have left something in the train, a parcel, an overcoat, a mackintosh, a stick, an umbrella, a camera, a fur, a suitcase. The travelers have now begun to go completely to pieces in the grand manner. Next comes an effective little interlude about an airplane trip, which is one of my favorite passages in this swift and sorrowful tragedy. "I want to reserve a place in the plane leaving tomorrow morning. When do we start? Can we get anything to eat on board? When do we arrive? I feel sick. Have you any paper bags for air sickness? The noise is terrible. Have you any cotton wool? When are we going to land?" This brief masterpiece caused me to cancel an air trip from London to Paris and go the easy way across the Channel. We now come to a section called At the Hotel, in which things go from worse to awful. Did you not get my letter? I wrote to you 3 weeks ago. I asked for a first-floor room. If you can't give me something better, I shall go away. The chambermaid never comes when I ring. I cannot sleep at night, there is so much noise. I have just had a wire, I must leave at once. Panic has begun to set in, and it is not appeased any by the advent of the chambermaid. Are you the chambermaid? There are no towels here. The sheets on this bed are damp. This room is not clean. I have seen a mouse in the room. You will have to set a mouse trap here. The bells of hell at this point begin to ring in earnest. These shoes are not mine. I put my shoes here. Where are they now? The light is not good. The bulb is broken. The radiator is too warm. The radiator doesn't work. It is cold in this room. This is not clean. Bring me another. I don't like this. I can't eat this. Take it away. I somehow now see the tourist's wife stalking angrily out of the hotel to get away from it all without any shoes on, and properly enough the booklet seems to follow her course, first under guides and interpreters. You are asking too much. I will not give you any more. I shall call a policeman. He can settle this affair. Then under inquiring the way, I am lost. I was looking for... Someone robbed me. That man robbed me. That man is following me everywhere. She rushes to the hairdresser, where, for a change, everything goes quite smoothly until the water is too hot. You are scalding me. Then she goes shopping, but there is no surcease. You have not given me the right change. I bought this 2 days ago. It doesn't work. It is broken. It is torn. It doesn't fit me. Then to a restaurant for a snack and a reviving cup of tea. This is not fresh. This piece is too fat. This doesn't smell very nice. There is a mistake in the bill. While I was dining, someone has taken my purse. I have left my glasses, my watch, a ring in the lavatory. Madness has now come upon her, and she rushes wildly out into the street. Her husband, I think, has at the same time plunged blindly out of the hotel to find her. We come then, quite naturally, to accident, which is calculated to keep the faint of heart, nay, the heart of oak, safely at home by his own fireside. There has been an accident. Go and fetch a policeman quickly. Is there a doctor near here? Send for the ambulance. He is seriously injured. She has been run over. He has been knocked down. Someone has fallen into the water. The ankle, the arm, the back, a bone, the face, the finger, the foot, the head, the knee, the leg, the neck, the nose, the wrist, the shoulder. He has broken his arm. He has broken his leg. He has a sprained ankle. He has a sprained wrist. He is losing blood. He has fainted. He has lost consciousness. He has burnt his face. It is swollen. It is bleeding. Bring some cold water. Help me to carry him. Apparently, you just let her lie there while you attend to him. But of course, she was merely run over, whereas he has taken a terrific tossing around. We next see the husband and wife back in their room at the dreary hotel, both in bed and both obviously hysterical. This scene is entitled Illness. I am feeling very ill. Send for the doctor. I have pains all over. The back, the chest, the ear, the head, the eyes, the heart, the joints, the kidneys, the lungs, the stomach, the throat, the tongue. Put out your tongue. The heart is affected. I feel a pain here. He is not sleeping well. He cannot eat. My stomach is out of order. She is feverish. I have caught a cold. I have caught a chill. He has a temperature. I have a cough. Will you give me a prescription? What must I do? Must I stay in bed? I feel better. When will you come and see me again? Biliousness, rheumatism, insomnia, sunstroke, fainting, a fit, hoarseness, sore throat, the medicine, the remedy, a poultice, a draught, a tablespoonful, a teaspoonful, a sticking plaster, senna, iodine. That last suicidal bleat for iodine is to me a masterful touch. Our couple finally get on their feet again, for travelers are tough, they've got to be. But we see under the next heading, common words and phrases, that they are left forever punch-drunk and shattered. Can I help you? Excuse me. Carry on. Look here. Look down there. Look up there. Why? How? When? Where? Because. That's it. It is too much. It is too dear. It is very cheap. Who? What? Which? Look out. Those are Valkyries, one feels, riding around and above and under our unhappy husband and wife. The book sweeps on to a mad operatic ending of the tragedy, with all the strings and brasses and woodwinds going full blast. Where are we going? Where are you going? Come quickly and see. I shall call a policeman. Bring a policeman. I shall stay here. Will you help me? Help, fire. Who are you? I don't know you. I don't want to speak to you. Leave me alone. That will do. You are mistaken. It was not I. I didn't do it. I will give you nothing. Go away now. It has nothing to do with me. Where should one apply? What must I do? What have I done? I have done nothing. I have already paid you. I have paid you enough. Let me pass. Where is the British consulate? The oboes take that last despairing wail, and the curtain comes down. Appendix. This underdeveloped snapshot of Cato, which catches him in a not unbecoming light, I found in the pages of Mommsen's History of Rome when I was in Italy 5 years ago. At that time, and in that place, almost any ancient Roman was bound to seem to me an admirable and amusing fellow by comparison with the fascist dictator, old Stab-in-the-Back. There is a well-rounded portrait of Cato in Plutarch's Lives, and a full-length painting, done in burning oils, in H.G. Wells' Outline of History. For the sins of Marcus Porcius Cato were dark and manifold. He abandoned in Spain the war-horse which had carried him to triumph there. He sold his slaves when they became old. He practiced usury on a grand scale. During his 10 years of office as censor, Cato interfered with the pastimes, pleasures, and privileges of practically everyone in Rome except himself. He shook his little fist at the philosophy and culture of Greece and persecuted her teachers. It was mainly because of him that the land on which Carthage once had stood was plowed up and sown with salt. I have reprinted After Cato What in this book, partly because the piece also contains a glimpse of Colonel Johnstone of the 5th New York Cavalry, flitting through the soft darkness of a Virginia night in the year of our Lord 1863. I didn't want to leave that out of this collection, for it is one of my favorite moments in history. Shortly after the story appeared in the New Yorker, 7 or 8 Southerners wrote me, one of them from Fairfax Courthouse, to report what had actually happened to Colonel Johnstone on that night. It seems that he concealed himself with great ingenuity and the highest kind of courage under the seat of an outside toilet, where he remained until Mosby and his men had gone. Thereupon he emerged, surely one of the most remarkable figures of the war between the states. This concludes the reading of My World, and welcome to it. Your reader has been